Hi Mayans and welcome back to my channel. Or if this is your first time watching, I'm Melody Maia Monet. And I talk about everything in my transgender, asexual, and lesbian life that you would really like to know about, but are afraid to ask. And today I wanted to talk about something that I've had to do recently that unfortunately a lot of us have to do, and that is cut off a family member. You know, I remember about 6 or 7 years ago, Jenny Boylan came to speak at Rollins College, which is a little local college here in Orlando. And she was my hero. I mean, from the very beginning of my transition, I hung on every word of hers, especially those she wrote my favorite book, She's Not There. I read that book like my life depended on it, almost as if it was a guidebook for what I wanted to do with my life, which pretty much it was. I wasn't quite sure I wanted to transition back then. I was still married with everything that comes with that. And here she was, an example of somebody who at about my age had also transitioned, and by the time she came to speak in Florida, we had already become Facebook friends because of a mutual friend we both have. And finally we got to the point of the night where they had an audience Q&A, and I plucked up my courage and I got up and I asked her a question. And I still remember shaking. I was so nervous. But I finally got out the question, and it was, how long do you wait for somebody to finally accept you as a transgender woman? And I'll never forget her reply. She said, it all depends on how important that person is to you in your life. She said if it was somebody very close to her, she would be willing to wait forever. And of course, the person I was talking about in my life was my mother. She's the one person I really cared about that was giving me the most trouble for having transitioned. From the very beginning when I moved in with her in Florida, all she did was try to tear me down. She put doubts in my mind. She told me that I was doing a terrible thing to my son. When I changed my name legally, she told me she wanted to adopt a little boy and give him my old name to replace me. She can be very dramatic. Not like me at all. But to be serious, in those times when I probably needed the most support, she gave me the least. I mean, she was giving me a place to stay, so she was feeding my body, but not my soul, which at that time is probably what I needed most of all. I needed her to be my mother, or at least the mother I always wanted her to be, but in truth, she never has been. And while Jenny Boylan's words had resonated with me, I can't say I was willing to wait forever. She did slowly get better, just ever so slowly. She called me Maia, and she tried with the pronouns. I mean, she'd screw it up all the time, but I was willing to take that in order to basically have harmony and peace in the family. But over the years, it really started to wear on me. It really started to bug me. And because she speaks Spanish, the opportunity to misgender me seemed like it was every other word. And so often people would say, she's your mom, you know, give her time. She gave birth to a boy. People prioritized her feelings way over mine. And I think that happens over and over again in the transgender community. We are asked to deny a very essential part of us, our identity, for the sake of other people's comfort. It's like we're telling people we have this thing that is potentially deadly if we're not supported in it. And then they immediately place limits and boundaries on that support. Just enough so we stay alive, but not enough to make us happy. They're not willing to say, whatever it is that you need, I am going to do. Because I know this is important to you, and I know this is a trauma you've carried for your entire life, and I love you, and I want you to stay here. I want you to be here tomorrow. And it breaks my heart that people won't do that. We're supposed to give them limitless passes and understanding and patience. Allow them to repeatedly deny our identities so that they're not the ones who are embarrassed. And you know, I've misgendered people. I know what that feels like. I know how embarrassing that can be. And I find it challenging sometimes to remember the pronouns for some of my non-binary friends. But I also know that it is so important. So when I do it, I apologize. I don't ignore it. I don't pretend it didn't just happen. I mean, there's a huge elephant in the room when that happens, and all of us are just supposed to ignore it. And then I do my very best to try to do better next time, because that's what that other person deserves. And what I found out with my mom is that there actually is a limit. I am not willing to wait forever. And for me, I hit that limit at Thanksgiving. And what happened was my son had flown in from out of town, and she doesn't get to see him that often, and he doesn't get to see her that often. And she is his grandmother. Coincidentally, when I originally moved out of my mother's house, I cut her off then too. And I tried to keep that up until my son came in from out of town for Christmas, and I just felt guilty about keeping him away from her. So we did reconnect then, and like I said, things did get a little better. But this time things got decidedly worse. In our conversations, she was misgendering, it seemed like every other word. And whereas before I would probably make a joke about that to kind of just make the point that, Mom, I'm noticing what you're doing and I don't like it, but at the same time avoid embarrassing her, this this time I couldn't do it, because this time I realized I was having an anxiety attack, emotions and feelings and tears that I couldn't control. I don't know if it's because of the times we're living in right now. The kind of added stress was something I just did not need. But after a couple days of this kind of treatment, I decided I am not going to take it anymore. And I actually ended up talking about it with my therapist. I actually wrote my mom quite a long letter, que ya no lo podía soportar más, which in Spanish means I could no longer take it, or probably more accurately, that I can no longer tolerate it. And I showed that letter to my therapist, and I'm pretty sure I showed it to one of my sisters and a couple other friends, but I eventually made the decision not to send it to her at all. And that's because my therapist made the point, you know, who's this letter for really? Because you could just cut her off and that would be the end of it. If it was to get any kind of revenge or just make her feel bad or just dig it in, that maybe that wasn't the healthiest thing to do. But from that day forward, I've done my best to not speak to her on the phone, because when she speaks to me in person, that's when she starts misgendering me. For some reason, when she sends me messages and texts, which doesn't happen that often, she keeps everything straight. Maybe it's because at that point she's not looking at me directly and she has to think more about her words, so she gets it more consistently correct. In fact, I don't think she's ever misgendered me in an actual message. But if she does, I am perfectly willing to cut her off from that avenue of communication as well. Now, when I say I've tried my best, that's because there is one time I did speak to her on the phone. At the end of January, I caught COVID. Now, fortunately for me, it was very mild. I actually never got a fever. I actually never really felt all that sick. Anyhow, my mom called me in the middle of all that. And as I watched the phone ring with her name on it, I really thought about it. I thought, do I answer? Do I allow for the possibility that she might hurt me? And I felt a little guilt because she's my mom and I'd caught this virus that, you know, on TV they're saying a lot of people have died from. And I know she'd be concerned. So I did answer the phone call. And yeah, it was just as bad as I had feared. Like in the very first sentence, it was that bad. My God. She was like, I heard you're positive. And she used the masculine form of positive. And I immediately corrected her. And then she laughed and she said, well, you know, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. And understand, it has been 10 years. It has been a full decade. By this point, I'm teaching an old dog an old trick. And I'm sick, and here she is laughing. Oh gosh, I couldn't take it anymore. It just galvanized me all the more that I was making the right decision. And when I reviewed it with my therapist, who herself is an older Latina woman, she was like, yeah, Maya, 10 years is enough time. So yeah, I am no longer speaking to her. And I can't say it's been hard. We've never been that close. It's actually been very liberating. 10 of 10, recommend. And it has made things more complicated, I will say that. Recently, my sisters came up with her, then they invited me out, and I say, well, if she's gonna be there, I'm not gonna be there. So I ended up not seeing my sisters, and I gotta say, that really did hurt. But I am not going to bend on this, and as far as I'm concerned, this is gonna last until the day she dies. I mean, if by some miracle she realizes what she's doing is really, really hurting me in a profound way, and then sincerely makes the attempts to try to do better, then yeah, I would be willing to meet and speak with her again. But at this point, I think the next time I'm going to see my mom is at her funeral. And that is super sad. It is not where I want to be. But I am no longer willing to accept from people things that hurt me just because I'm transgender. Because other people are made uncomfortable by it. That is not strange. That is not so exotic anymore. That is not shameful. I'm sure many of you out there in the LGBTQ+ community have experienced something similar or are experiencing something similar right now. Don't accept anything less than the dignity you deserve. Anyway, I hope you liked that video. This is my big comeback video, I suppose. But you know, I haven't been in the best mental space and I've been prioritizing my own health above my own YouTube channel. But lately I've been feeling a little better and I've been starting to write down ideas that excite me. And I'm not going to make any promises, but I think you're going to see videos a little more frequently than once, like every 4 months. Anyway, if any of you have experienced similar things with your family, and I know you have, put them in the comments down below. As always, my social media links are also down below, and I have to say, I have not stopped posting on things like my Instagram and Twitter, so if you want to have more contact with me, those are the places to do it. And if you have a dime to spare, please consider giving to my Patreon. And on that note, please like this video by giving it a thumbs up, please share this video, and please subscribe, and see you around the interwebs.